I remember smiling when the words left my mouth. It was such a normal sentence, such a small moment of gratitude. I had just come back from the neighborhood shop, the old blue bicycle standing near the door of my apartment, and my aunt was sitting on the sofa with the proud expression of someone who believes she has done a great kindness. I said, "Thank you, Kala, for giving me this bicycle. It really helps me get to work." For a second she just looked at me, then she tilted her head the way she always did when something did not fit into her version of reality. That was when she replied, calm but confused, "I gave you a Mercedes-Benz, though." Those 9 words changed the temperature of the room. The ceiling fan was making its usual lazy circles, yet I felt as if something heavy had just stopped in the air. My first thought was that she was joking. My aunt loved dramatic humor and sometimes teased me about marrying rich or becoming a big officer one day. I laughed and told her she must be mixing me with my sister Nadia, who was always surrounded by luxury dreams. But her face did not carry even a shadow of playfulness. She asked me again when I had sold the car and why I was living like this if such a gift had existed. I felt an uncomfortable sting, not because of the mention of Mercedes, but because she sounded almost certain. Certainty in our family was a dangerous thing. It usually meant someone else was lying. That night, I opened the family WhatsApp group after months of silence. I typed the same sentence about thanking the aunt, and within minutes emojis of laughter filled the screen from my cousins. My mother sent a voice note telling me not to disturb the poor old woman with my imaginations. My brother-in-law wrote that a bicycle was more suitable for my level. Still, none of them answered the real question. Why would my aunt invent such an expensive memory? I stared at the small apartment around me, the peeling paint, the second-hand fridge, my uniform hanging on a nail, and wondered in which universe a Mercedes had ever belonged to me. Sleep did not come easily. I kept hearing the aunt's line like a broken record. I tried to travel back through my own memories. At 18, I had signed many papers my parents placed in front of me. They said it was for a college fund, then for the late uncle's property matters. I never read carefully. Reading carefully was considered disrespect. I began to feel the slow burn of suspicion. Suspicion is like oil. Once it spreads, you can never clean it completely. 2 days later, my aunt visited again, bringing sweets and another small envelope. She said the bicycle was only a temporary help and asked me to check the envelope when I was alone. The way she whispered, "alone," pushed a hook of fear into my heart. I wondered whether the Mercedes story was connected to the death of my uncle 3 years ago, whose business had vanished overnight. I took the bicycle and rode to work through the busy Lahore-style streets, buses roaring beside me, thinking how strange life was. I was pedaling like an ordinary girl, while a mystery of a silver car chased me that I had never even seen. By the time I returned home, the envelope was still waiting, silent and dangerous, and I knew the bicycle thanks had opened a door I might regret entering. The envelope felt heavier than it looked. I kept it in my drawer beneath the pile of unpaid electricity bills, almost afraid that it might breathe in the dark. At work, I tried to focus on my routine as a junior accounts clerk, counting invoices and listening to the constant complaints of my manager, yet my mind was parked somewhere far away in an imaginary showroom. I began to notice how differently my aunt treated me compared to the rest of the family. She called every evening, asked whether the bicycle chain was oiled, whether I had eaten, and then again slipped the question about the Mercedes into the conversation as naturally as salt in food. I stopped correcting her. Instead, I started observing. My sister Nadia invited me for tea on Sunday. The hook of suspense tightened when she insisted I bring the bicycle along so her children could see it. In our house, a bicycle was not transportation. It was an exhibit of failure. My mother repeated the same story to neighbors about how fortunate Nadia was and how I was still searching for direction. I asked them directly what my aunt meant. The room became silent the way rooms do before a storm. Nadia said the old woman had promised many things that never happened, and that I should not build castles on tires. But when I mentioned registration records, her hand trembled slightly while lifting the cup. Trembling hands are louder than shouting voices. That night, I finally opened the envelope. Inside were photocopies of excise-style vehicle papers dated 4 years back with my full name printed as owner. I felt my breath stolen. There was also a bank statement showing a large withdrawal signed by my mother for car maintenance and transfer. Maintenance of what? Transfer to whom? The bicycle leaning near my bed suddenly looked like a poor witness in a rich crime. I called my aunt. She said she had kept originals in her locker and that the family had told her I was enjoying the car in another city. The hook was no longer in the air, it was inside my blood. I began a secret investigation. On the bicycle, I visited the excise office, pretending to check a friend record, and the clerk confirmed a silver Mercedes had indeed been registered to me and transferred within 3 months. The beneficiary address belonged to my brother-in-law. I felt humiliation convert into something sharper, almost like intelligent anger. I did not want noisy revenge. I wanted clean truth. My manager at work noticed the change in me and asked why I was suddenly working overtime without pay. I told him a small lie that I was planning to upgrade my bicycle. Upgrading was true, only the scale was different. I opened a new folder in my laptop named Bicycle Project, placing every proof inside it. The aunt kept supporting me, sending fuel money for the investigation rides as if she were arming a soldier with pedals. One evening my mother called, crying that Nadia was facing financial problems and that I should help her sell the bicycle to contribute. I almost laughed at the perfect circle of fate. The outline of power reversal had started drawing itself. I looked at the photocopies, at my tired legs, and realized that the thanks for a simple bicycle had uncovered an entire Mercedes-sized lie. The room around me remained small, but my understanding had grown dangerously large, and I knew the next part of life would not be peddled in silence. I started fearing the telephone more than the streets. Every ring from home carried a new layer of guilt wrapped in fake affection. At the office, I used the bicycle as my moving thinking chamber, riding long routes after duty just to arrange the puzzle inside my head. I began to see how cleverly the family had designed my image. Nadia was the bright center, the daughter who made us proud, while I was kept at the edge like a spare tire. The aunt's originals in the locker were now the only lighthouse I trusted. She told me not to rush, that truth in our house needed staging the way weddings needed lights. My brother-in-law Cameron visited my apartment on Tuesday. The suspense hook tightened again when he said the bicycle was a generous gift and that I should record a video thanking the aunt so relatives abroad could see how caring the family was. I asked him about the papers directly. He smiled too quickly, explaining that the Mercedes transfer was a routine family decision because I was studying then and could not drive. He added that the car had been sold to fund Nadia's house and his children's education. Education built on my name, house polished with my ribbon, yet no one had considered informing me. His body language was relaxed, but the speed of his words betrayed fear. At night, the aunt came with me to her locker in the bank. Originals proved everything: purchase receipt with red ribbon note, my identity card copy, and the affidavit where my mother declared I had requested the transfer myself. Requested? I felt the room spin. The bicycle outside waited like an innocent horse, while inside the bank a royal crime was crowned. The aunt said she had believed the family because elders were considered holy. I wondered how many holy people were professional liars. I consulted a young lawyer named Sarah through a colleague reference. She explained that the affidavit could be challenged as forged consent and that I could claim either the car's value or the asset purchased from its money. The outline of revenge turned legal and beautiful. I began planning notices, calculating market price of the old Mercedes model and the current worth of Nadia's house. Calculations are calm soldiers, they march without noise. My manager scolded me again for arriving late on the bicycle. I told him I was learning balance. Balance was true in another scale. I was balancing between family love and family theft. Nadia kept sending messages asking me to stay quiet because Cameron was under business stress. I replied with silence. Silence had now become my mother tongue. One rainy evening, I rode the bicycle through puddles, thinking whether exposing them would burn every bridge I owned. The aunt said bridges built on lies were already ashes. I felt tears mix with rain and realized that the bicycle thanks had not been a small door. It was an entire highway leading me toward a Mercedes-sized destiny I had never chosen. I parked outside my apartment and whispered to myself that the next act of life would belong to me, not to Nadia, not to Cameron, not even to the aunt, only to the girl who kept pedaling toward the truth. For the first time in my life, I began reading documents like weapons. Each paper Sarah prepared for me looked sharper than any knife Cameron had ever shown while cutting birthday cakes. I stopped visiting home on Sundays, and my mother turned this absence into another story for neighbors. She said the bicycle had made me arrogant and independent. Independent sounded almost like an insult in her dictionary. My aunt encouraged the distance and reminded me that investigations required oxygen, not crowded relatives. At work, I used the office computer to check old dealership portals. The hook of suspense struck again when I discovered an email thread between Cameron and the dealer discussing my gratitude problem and how a bicycle might keep me satisfied if the Mercedes secret ever leaked. Leaked secrets were not fears for them, they were business risks. I felt my chest tight, imagining how carefully they had measured my self-respect in tires and engines. Sarah sent the first legal notice on my behalf, asking for explanation of forged consent and transfer of the silver Mercedes. The outline of confrontation began rolling like a slow film reel. Nadia called immediately, crying louder than the ceiling fan. She said I was destroying family unity for a car that no longer existed. I asked her why unity had not been destroyed when they kept the money. Questions were now my new pedals. Cameron arrived furious on Thursday evening outside my apartment. He shouted that the affidavit carried my signature, and that challenging it meant calling my late father a criminal. Late father had now become their emotional shield. I remained calm the way your channel protagonists remain calm, speaking softly that shields made of graves could not stop living justice. His shouting attracted neighbors, and he quickly changed tone, requesting tea and promising settlement. Promises from him smelled like old petrol. My aunt visited again, bringing another small gift, a helmet for the bicycle. She said safety first because the road ahead would be rough. Rough roads were true. My manager at office threatened to cut my salary for the stress I brought into workplace. I realized how corporate-style pressure mirrored family pressure. Powerful people always feared exposure more than God. Sarah discovered that Nadia's house was partly registered in my mother's name only weeks after the Mercedes sale. The hook of truth tightened further. They had converted my ribbon into concrete. I imagined the silver car standing like a ghost inside those walls. Ghosts cannot drive, but they can haunt beautifully. One evening the aunt told me a memory I had forgotten. Before his death my uncle had said, "Give her something that moves so she learns she also deserves to stand." The car was that movement, the bicycle only its shadow. I felt the outline of destiny becoming moral, not material. Yet material justice was still pending. Nadia sent a long message saying she would visit and beg forgiveness if I withdrew the notice. Begging forgiveness from thieves is another crime. I looked at the helmet, at the bicycle chain, and at Sarah's folder, knowing that the next act would no longer be about Mercedes alone. It would be about who truly owned my movement, my respect, and the road beneath my feet. The legal notice started working like a silent alarm across the family. Relatives who had ignored me for years suddenly remembered my phone number, asking whether the bicycle was comfortable and whether I truly planned to fight elders in court. I realized how fear manufactures affection faster than any factory. My aunt told me to stay steady, that steady people looked slow only until the finish line arrived. I kept riding to work every day, yet now the streets felt different, almost like they were watching my back. Sarah called me with another discovery. The payment for the Mercedes had not been entirely cash. Part of it was a trade-in deal involving Cameron's old sedan. This meant the transaction chain was even dirtier than we imagined. Dirtier chains create stronger hooks for viewers, and I began thinking like the narrator of your channel, comparing my life with the cinematic script of justice. At office, my manager gave me a warning letter saying personal disputes should remain outside corporate walls. I wondered how walls built from my money were not considered personal. Nadia visited my apartment on Saturday evening. She brought her children and asked them to praise the bicycle so my heart might melt. Melting hearts are useful for villains, they pour them into new molds. She admitted the car had been sold, but insisted the decision saved the family from bankruptcy after my father's illness. Illness had become another steering wheel in her hands. I asked why they never informed me even when I turned adult and needed help. She remained silent for a long minute, longer than any sermon my mother had ever delivered. My mother called during the visit, shouting through the speaker that the aunt was poisoning me and that Mercedes stories were devil whispers. Devil whispers looked expensive and silver in the records. Cameron arrived later with a bag of groceries, pretending he cared about my bicycle diet. He offered a small settlement amount equal to the price of 2 new bicycles. I almost laughed at the mathematics of insult. Sarah told him the claim would follow market value, not tire charity, and he left sweating like an old engine in summer. The aunt invited me for a family gathering at her house next week. She planned to confront everyone publicly and asked me to bring copies and the bicycle along. Bicycle had now become the symbol of the entire drama, the horse that carried the poor girl toward a rich battlefield. At office, I prepared leave application fearing the corporate warning might convert into firing. Fired clerks do not own Mercedes, yet fired owners can still peddle truth. One evening while returning from work, I felt followed by a white SUV near the signal. The suspense hook tightened again inside my chest. I imagined Cameron hiring someone to frighten me the way he had frightened my consent years back. Frightened consent is easier to drive. I accelerated the bicycle, thinking how strange acceleration was. I was accelerating toward a car I never received. At night, the aunt sent me a voice message saying, "Courage is also gratitude, do not forget." Forgetting was impossible now. The bicycle thanks had grown into a tree whose shade covered my entire understanding. I knew the next act of life would not allow any more mixed addresses, mixed signatures, or mixed love. Love either arrives like Mercedes with ribbon, or it arrives like bicycle with truth, and I had already chosen which fuel I trusted. I began treating the bicycle like my only loyal relative. The helmet, the chain, even the small bell felt more honest than any voice coming from home. At the office, the warning letter turned into daily sarcasm. The manager said dreams of Mercedes did not match my attendance sheet. Attendance sheets are cruel mirrors. They show time, not truth. I kept quiet and worked on quarterly reports with Sarah over the phone during lunch breaks, hiding the folder inside my bag the way students hide forbidden books. The day of the gathering at my aunt's house approached like a slow red signal. She called me every evening asking whether my legs were strong enough for the ride to her neighborhood. Strong legs were necessary because the battlefield had shifted from documents to drawing rooms. Nadia and Cameron tried again to meet me outside the office, bringing another proposal, this time slightly larger, equal to the price of a used hatchback. Used proposals cannot repair new wounds. Sarah rejected it politely and told them the final confrontation would decide everything. One strange incident added a new hook of fear. A colleague at work showed me a social media post where Cameron's friend claimed he had once driven my silver Mercedes to Murray for vacation. The post included a blurry photo of mountains behind the car. I had never visited Murray in any Mercedes, yet my name kept traveling without me. Traveling names are dangerous passports. I sent the screenshot to my aunt, and she said the family had told her the same travel story for years. Lies in our house were professional tour guides. On Friday evening, I rode the bicycle to her house carrying copies in a plastic file. The streets were crowded with vendors and school children, and I felt as if everyone could read the papers through my shirt. My mother arrived before me and started crying as soon as she saw the bicycle at the gate. Crying mothers are powerful storms, they flood logic within minutes. She begged my aunt not to insult elders and repeated that the car money was spent on hospital bills. Hospital bills had now become their national anthem. When Nadia entered the room with Cameron, the temperature changed again. My aunt asked me in front of everyone why I was thanking for a bicycle if a Mercedes gift had existed. I placed the originals Sarah had already delivered to her and watched how faces convert colors like traffic lights. Cameron insisted he had acted with my consent, and that challenging it meant challenging the honor of the dead. Honor of the Dead was parked beautifully in concrete form inside Nadia's house. My aunt announced she would not stay silent anymore. Silence in our family had been misused like my identity card. She planned to call the dealer on speaker and invite the friend who posted the Murray photo. Invited witnesses are stronger than sermons. I felt my heart beating faster, wondering whether the bicycle ride would return me a car or burn me a family. At night, I returned to the apartment exhausted, legs shaking yet mind clear. Clear minds are rare engines, they run on truth alone. My manager called asking whether I had sold the bicycle for settlement. I told him I was still learning balance. Balance between elders and justice, between tires and engines, between Mercedes and bicycle. And I knew the next part of life would finally decide which vehicle truly carried my name, my movement, and the road ahead. Sarah's plan began moving faster than any bicycle wheel I had ever pedaled. She contacted the dealer, and the man confirmed he would speak at my aunt's house next gathering, adding that he still remembered the ribbon on the silver Mercedes and how happy he thought I was. Happiness in his memory belonged to a girl who never received even the car's shadow. I felt my identity stretched between two universes, one built by my family stories, the other printed in excise ink. My aunt called me on Monday saying Cameron had requested her forgiveness and blamed my mother for pushing the transfer. Pushed transfers are like pushed marriages, they rarely serve the bride. She asked me again what I wanted from this confrontation. I told her I wanted the House of Truth more than any Mercedes of metal. Metal cars grow old, truth houses grow dangerous. At the office, another incident tightened the suspense hook. My manager received an anonymous letter accusing me of stealing corporate time for personal Mercedes cases. Time thieves were sitting comfortably in Nadia's drawing room, yet the letter targeted the bicycle rider. Sarah advised me not to fear firing because ownership portals proved I was larger than any clerk seat. Larger owners sometimes sit on smaller chairs intentionally. Nadia tried again to meet me in the park near my apartment. She admitted the car money financed their lifestyle and that Cameron had driven the Mercedes once to impress clients. Impressing clients with my ribbon felt like wearing my wedding dress without me. She begged me to stay quiet and promised monthly support equal to the bicycle petrol. Monthly support from thieves is another lease of slavery. Sarah arranged a meeting with bank officials to verify the locker originals. The affidavit signature showed technical differences from my real signatures on college forms. Technical differences are beautiful microscopes. They reveal monsters wearing mother duputtas. Cameron sent me a long audio saying he would expose the aunt as confused if I continued. Exposing confused women was easier than exposing greedy men. My aunt decided to visit the police-style record office with Sarah. She said the Mercedes ghost traveling to Murray might involve illegal cases and that my name could be used in accidents. Accidents built on my name frightened me more than any shouting mother. Sarah planned to file criminal complaint for identity misuse alongside civil claim. Complaints were now becoming highways. One evening while returning from work, I fell from the bicycle near the signal when a bus brushed too close. The fall acted as another hook for my understanding. Movement stolen years ago still tried to kill me in present. Sarah arrived with first aid box and told me falls make stronger narrators. At night, I opened my folder watching how proof accumulated like a showroom of justice. The aunt sent me another message saying, "Finish lines are also beginnings, be ready." Ready girls ride bicycles, ready owners drive Mercedes of truth, and I was preparing to change vehicles without asking permission from the family gatekeepers ever again. The final gathering felt like a courtroom wearing the clothes of a drawing room. Sarah arrived early at my aunt's house, and this time the dealer and the Murray photo friend were already sitting there like engines waiting for ignition. My mother kept repeating at the door that bicycles had filled my mind with poison, but poison was about to change addresses. Nadia hugged the aunt too tightly, the way guilty people hug witnesses before testimony. I parked my bicycle at the gate, and for a moment wondered whether this small, loyal vehicle would watch me win a war of a lifetime. My aunt opened the conversation again with the same line that had hooked everyone. Why was I thanking for a bicycle if she had once gifted a Mercedes-Benz in my name? The dealer confirmed the ribbon car story and added that Cameron himself had come to finalize the transfer claiming I requested it. Requested lies were now sitting face to face with printed truth. Sarah showed the technical report proving my signatures were copied, not born from my hand. Copied signatures are orphans. They do not know their parents. Cameron tried to steer the room toward graves again, saying challenging elders meant disrespecting the dead. The Murray friend interrupted him, admitting he had driven the Mercedes only once and later deleted the post fearing legal trouble. Fear had now changed drivers. Bank officials confirmed the locker originals were authentic and that my mother withdrawal statement connected directly to Nadia's house purchase. Houses purchased from bicycles of lies cannot stand on highways of truth. Sarah announced she was filing criminal complaint for identity misuse. The police officer who accompanied her explained that my name being used in accidents could carry serious risk. Cameron began sweating and finally admitted everything. He said the family believed I would never question because I was the obedient spare tire daughter. Spare tires sometimes become steering wheels unexpectedly. The aunt asked Nadia and my mother to choose between returning the asset or facing court. Nadia started crying for real this time, not manufactured tears, saying the house was their children's future. Futures stolen from my ribbon were already living inside those walls. My mother fell at my feet begging me to forgive Cameron for the sake of bicycles of family. I lifted her gently, the way narrators lift falling villains, telling her forgiveness would arrive only after returning justice. Weeks later, the mediation ended with the house partly transferred to me as compensation, along with remaining amount from the Mercedes sale. Cameron was arrested for a short period and lost many clients. Corporate-style fate followed legal-style fate beautifully. My manager at office called asking whether the Mercedes dream finally came true. I told him I still rode the bicycle because movement earned was sweeter than movement stolen. I met my aunt again on the same sofa where the bicycle thanks had started everything. She offered to gift me a brand new Mercedes with ribbon. I refused politely, keeping the bicycle bell ringing like a small national anthem. The relatives who once laughed now requested my time and my forgiveness. Forgiveness is a luxury car. It chooses its own driver. I still keep the bicycle near my door as the witness of the day my gratitude collided with a Mercedes-sized lie. Lies fell, concrete changed addresses, and the road ahead finally learned my real name. The story never belonged to the car or to the bicycle. It belonged to the truth that kept pedaling inside me.